My name is Layla Griffin. I'm 26 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that if you kept your head down, worked hard, and stayed loyal, your family would eventually see your worth. I don't believe that anymore. 6 months ago, my own sister took a photograph of me carrying the last box out of my childhood home and posted it online with 3 words: "The parasite is gone." 139 people liked it within 10 minutes. Now let me take you back to where it started. It was a Tuesday in late January, and Houston couldn't decide if it wanted to rain. I remember the air smelled like wet asphalt and someone burning leaves 2 yards over. I was standing in the driveway of the house on Lockwood Drive in the 5th Ward, holding a cardboard box I'd flipped inside out so the Blue Bell ice cream print wouldn't show. Inside were the last of my things: a chipped coffee mug, 3 framed photos, my winter coat, and a folder I kept pressed against my chest like it might blow away. My sister Kayla was standing by the mailbox with her phone already up. She didn't offer to help. She just watched me walk past the rose bushes our mother never once watered herself. Past that swing, creaking in the breeze. That swing had been creaking since my grandfather bought the place, and nobody ever oiled it. Because my father used to say, "A quiet porch is a lying porch." Hold on to that. It matters more than you'd guess by the end. She raised her phone and took the picture the moment I reached the driveway. I didn't turn around. I loaded the last box, checked the straps on my mattress, and got in the truck. I sat there a second, looking at that house one more time. The brick gone dusty rose from decades of sun, the gutter that had hung loose since the storm 2 years back that no one ever fixed. Then I drove away, without looking in the mirror. This is the kind of drama family story that starts with one photograph and ends with people losing everything they thought was safe. What none of them knew was that I'd already spent 3 weeks quietly building a case against the very people laughing in that comment section. And the photo they thought was my humiliation was about to become the first piece of evidence that ended it. By the time I reached my new apartment in Eastwood, a 1-bedroom above a laundromat where you can hear the dryers thumping through the floor at night, my phone had already started buzzing. I carried boxes up 2 flights first. Bad news keeps just fine. When I finally sat on the floor of my empty living room, I opened my phone. The parasite is officially gone. 139 likes and climbing. My mother, Autumn Foster, had commented, "The house feels lighter already." My father, Jerome Bryant, added a laughing emoji. "Finally, some peace around here." I read every comment. Cousins, an aunt who used to send me birthday cards with $5 folded inside. I didn't respond. My chest felt like something had reached in and squeezed my hands, shaking slightly. But I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled the folder from the box marked Blue Bell Ice Cream. Inside were copies I'd been quietly collecting for 3 weeks. Bank statements, credit reports, printed emails. I sat on that bare floor and went through every page one more time. Then I opened my laptop and sent 3 documents to 3 different people. I scheduled one more message, a text to go out automatically at 6 the next morning. Then I closed the laptop and went to sleep on a bare mattress, feeling more peaceful than I had in over a year. I want you to understand something about silence. My family thought that because I didn't argue that night, I had nothing to argue with. They were about to learn otherwise. By morning, the laughter in that comment section had disappeared. My father sent 12 texts starting at 5:51 a.m. My brother Zion called 17 times, beginning at 6:20. Kayla texted at 7:05. "What did you do?" My mother wrote at 8:15. "Please, give me a chance to explain." By 9, Kayla had deleted the photo entirely, but deleting it didn't undo what it had already handed me. That picture meant to be my ending was about to become the first exhibit in a case I'd been building for weeks without any of them knowing. Before I tell you what my aunt said when she picked up the phone that morning, tell me, what time is it where you're watching this from? How far away are you from Houston right now? I'm curious how far this story travels before it's over. I called my Aunt Faith Simmons that morning, my mother's older sister, 22 years in bank compliance before she retired. A woman who noticed things, because noticing things had been her career. She was quiet a long moment. Then she told me something I wasn't expecting. 3 months earlier, she'd received an anonymous email. One line. Check the accounts under the name Griffin. Someone is being used. She hadn't known what to do with it. No proof, no sender she recognized. So she'd sat on it, unwilling to start a war over a single strange message. But she'd kept it, every day since. I think, she said, we should look at this together. Let me introduce the rest of the family before we go further. Zion was my older brother, 33, running a small construction company near the East Freeway, or trying to. He liked to talk about growing the business, the way men do when the business isn't growing. Kayla was 30, married to a quiet, careful man named Nolan Banks, with a 4-year-old son named Theo, who called our grandmother's old vacuum the old dragon for the racket it made. My father worked as an office administrator for a small logistics company downtown. The kind of job where his signature had to go on shipping and insurance paperwork most weeks. He ran our house the same way, with a low, flat voice that ended every conversation, whether or not anything had actually been resolved. My mother chaired the small finance committee at our church, the one that decided which families got help with light bills or funeral costs. She kept every password to every account in an accordion folder in the linen closet, like it was scripture. And me? I was, in my father's words, the lucky one who still gets taken care of. I thought about that phrase a lot my first night in that apartment. About being 22 and turning down a good internship in Dallas because my mother cried and said the family needed me close. About every family gathering since my father introducing me the same way. This one still needs looking after. I hadn't argued Ben either. But I want you to remember something before we move forward. I still haven't told you what happened 3 weeks before I carried that box out of that house. When a woman at an accounting firm in Midtown looked at my credit report and told me, gently, that I might want to sit down. 3 weeks before I carried that last box out, I sat across a desk from a hiring manager named Denise at a firm in Midtown Houston, interviewing for a senior position. Real money, real title. The first proof that years of night classes and CPA prep had meant something. The office smelled like fresh carpet and burnt coffee. Somewhere behind Denise's desk, a printer kept jamming and unjamming itself with a soft mechanical groan. I remember focusing on that sound instead of her face while she talked, because her face had already told me something was wrong before her mouth caught up. I have to be honest, Denise said, sliding a printout across the desk. Her voice had gone careful, the way people get when they're about to hand you bad news, wrapped in politeness. Our credit check came back concerning. You might want to pull your own report. I looked down at the paper before I let myself look up at her again. My name was on it, correctly spelled, correctly dated. That was almost the worst part. How official it all looked. Somewhere under the fluorescent lights of that office, my hands went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I remember sitting in my car in the parking garage afterward more clearly than almost anything else in this story. The garage was nearly empty, just my car and the low hum of a fluorescent tube 2 rows over that buzzed like it was thinking about dying. I didn't turn the engine on right away. I just sat there, with the printout in my lap, reading the same 3 lines over and over, waiting for the numbers to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They never did. 3 accounts I'd never opened. A credit card, $19,800. A business line of credit, $35,100, listing Zion's company as beneficiary. A personal loan, $25,400, deposited into a joint account my parents controlled. Over $80,000, all opened using my Social Security number, the Lockwood Drive address, and an old email account my mother had created for me at 17. I finally started the car when my hands stopped shaking enough to hold the wheel steady. On the drive home, I passed Theo's daycare. I always did, it was on the route, no matter which way I went, and I slowed down without meaning to. Through the chain-link fence, I could see a cluster of kids in bright shirts chasing a ball across the yard, and for one long second, I let myself imagine walking in there and pulling him out, just to hold him, just to have something in my arms that hadn't been used to hurt me. I didn't stop the car. I just watched the fence go by in the mirror and kept driving, already understanding in some part of myself I hadn't said out loud yet, that whatever came next couldn't touch him. That was the moment the plan actually started. Not the folder, not Aunt Faith, not the lawyer. That fence. I pulled the statements a few days later. One line item stopped my breath. A $780 charge at an educational toy store dated exactly to my nephew Theo's 3rd birthday. New kitchen cabinets. A weekend trip my parents had posted online captioned, "Celebrating 32 years." All of it, quietly, on credit that had my name and nowhere near my signature. This is the part of every drama family story where the quiet one is expected to just swallow it. I didn't. I asked my mother about it privately in the kitchen while she rolled dough for a cobbler she was bringing to church. The radio on the counter was playing the same gospel station Aunt Faith always kept on later, low enough to be background, the kind of hymn my mother had hummed along to my whole childhood, without ever seeming to notice she was doing it. Afternoon light came in slanted through the window over the sink, catching the flour dust that hung in the air every time she brought the rolling pin down. She didn't look surprised. She just kept rolling and said, "Families move money around sometimes, baby. You should be grateful you've always been taken care of." Her hands never stopped moving on the dough the entire time she said it, like the sentence cost her nothing at all. I stood there a second longer than I meant to, waiting for her to look up. She never did. I remember thinking that was almost worse than if she'd yelled, that she could say something like that to my face and keep rolling dough like we were talking about the weather. My father walked in and ended it the way he ended everything. That same low, flat voice. The one that always sounded final, whether or not anything had been settled. The kitchen light overhead flickered once when the screen door slammed behind him. An old wiring problem nobody had ever bothered to fix. The same way nobody had ever oiled that porch swing. "As long as you're living under this roof," he said, "you don't get to question how this family survives." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He said it the way he said everything, like a fact that had already been decided long before I walked into the room. And then he opened the refrigerator and poured himself a glass of tea, like the conversation was over. It was over, just not the way he thought. That night I went up to my old room and opened the drawer where I'd kept receipts since graduation. The drawer stuck a little, the way it always had, and underneath the receipts I found an old birthday card I hadn't seen in years. My grandmother's handwriting, shaky even then, wishing me a happy 18th, and adding, almost as an afterthought at the bottom, "Something's coming for you when you're 21, baby. Don't let anybody talk you out of what's yours." I hadn't understood what she meant back then. I'd assumed she was talking about growing up, about independence in some general grandmotherly way. Sitting on the floor of that room at 26, holding a printout with 3 fraudulent accounts on it, I read that line again and felt something cold move through me that I didn't have a name for yet. 4 years of records rent I covered when his hours got cut, an electric bill paid twice after they forgot and the lights got shut off, a new roof after the storm, 2 emergency loans to Zion, never once mentioned again. Over $61,000. Not one thank you card in the pile. I didn't say a word about what I'd already downloaded. Over the following weeks, I packed quietly in stages while telling no one my real plan, because I needed time to save enough to actually leave, and because Aunt Faith had told me plainly, build the whole case before you move, not after. That's the part I hadn't understood 18 months earlier, the first time I told my mother in that same kitchen that I wanted my own place. She'd cried. I'd stayed. This time, I wasn't asking permission. I was preparing. Those weeks had a strange, doubled quality to them. On the surface, nothing looked different. I still ate Sunday dinner at that table. I still let Theo climb into my lap and demand I do his favorite voice from the vacuum cleaner joke. I still hugged my mother goodbye at the door. But underneath all of it, I was watching everything with new eyes, the way my father's signature appeared on paperwork he never explained. The way my mother's accordion folder in the linen closet was always locked. The way Zion asked me for just a little help, temporary, you know how it is. Almost the same week I discovered his business line of credit had my name on it. I said yes to that one, $20 for gas, nothing that mattered, and watched his face for any flicker of guilt while he thanked me. There wasn't one. That told me more than any bank statement had. I called my Aunt Faith Simmons that morning, my mother's older sister, 22 years in bank compliance before she retired. A woman who noticed things, because noticing things had been her career. Faith had never married. She used to joke that she'd spent so many years reading other people's financial statements for a living that she'd lost all patience for anyone who wouldn't show her theirs. Underneath the joke was something realer. I think she'd learned early in a family like ours that the people who loved you loudest weren't always the ones you could trust with your name. She was quiet a long moment. Then she told me something I wasn't expecting. 3 months earlier, she'd received an anonymous email. One line. Check the accounts under the name Griffin. Someone is being used. She hadn't known what to do with it. No proof, no sender she recognized. So she'd sat on it, unwilling to start a war over a single strange message. But she'd kept it, every day since. I asked her, half joking, half not, whether she thought it could have come from inside the family. She didn't answer right away. She just said in that careful compliance officer voice of hers that anonymous tips almost always came from someone who already knew the truth and hadn't found their courage yet. I didn't think much of that answer at the time. I would think about it a great deal later. I think, she said, we should look at this together. Her house smelled like cedar and the peppermint tea she always kept steeping on the stove. We sat at her kitchen table, smaller than ours, but somehow it felt sturdier, and she pulled a legal pad toward her the way other people reach for a Bible. She didn't comfort me. She didn't tell me it would be okay. She just started making a list, one careful line at a time. And something about watching her handwriting fill that page made the whole thing feel survivable for the first time. Let me introduce the rest of the family before we go further. Zion was my older brother, 33, running a small construction company near the East Freeway, or trying to. He liked to talk about growing the business, the way men do when the business isn't growing. Kayla was 30, married to a quiet, careful man named Nolan Banks, with a 4-year-old son named Theo, who called our grandmother's old vacuum the old dragon for the racket it made. My father worked as an office administrator for a small logistics company downtown, the kind of job where his signature had to go on shipping and insurance paperwork most weeks. He ran our house the same way, with a low, flat voice that ended every conversation, whether or not anything had actually been resolved. My mother chaired the small finance committee at our church, the one that decided which families got help with light bills or funeral costs. She kept every password to every account in an accordion folder in the linen closet, like it was scripture. And me? I was, in my father's words, the lucky one who still gets taken care of. I thought about that phrase a lot my first night in that apartment. About being 22 and turning down a good internship in Dallas because my mother cried and said the family needed me close. About every family gathering since my father introducing me the same way. This one still needs looking after. I hadn't argued then either. But I want you to remember something before we move forward. I still haven't told you what happened 3 weeks before I carried that box out of that house, when a woman at an accounting firm in Midtown looked at my credit report and told me, gently, that I might want to sit down. She had a police report number and an FTC case file before she ever said a single word to her family. Smart strategy or cold betrayal? Team silence or team confrontation? Drop a 1 or a 2 in the comments right now before you find out what happens at that table next. I chose This Is It Soul Food on West Dallas Street on purpose. Warm light, busy enough that no one would dare raise their voice. The place smelled like fried catfish and cornbread. The second the door opened, a low murmur of Sunday after church regulars filling the booths, plates clattering somewhere behind the counter. I got there 20 minutes early and didn't order anything. I just sat with my hands flat on the table, watching the door, feeling my own pulse in my ears, louder than the room around me. Aunt Faith sat at the counter close enough to see sipping sweet tea she didn't actually want, her legal pad tucked into her purse just in case. My attorney, Ariel Price, wasn't there in person, but she'd prepped a proposal and given me one instruction. If anyone raises a hand or a voice, you leave. I don't need to be in the room to do my job. I'd texted my parents, Zion and Kayla, the night before documents they needed to see tomorrow, 1 p.m. My father refused. First, insisted any meeting happen in his house. I said the next meeting could happen through lawyers instead. He agreed within 10 minutes. I remember reading that reply, one word, fine, and feeling my hands go steady for the first time in weeks. It was the first time in my life I'd ever won an argument with him without saying a single extra word. I arrived early and set 4 sealed envelopes on the table, squaring their edges against the tablecloth until they lined up exactly. Because if my hands had something small to do, they didn't shake. Zion walked in first, his usual confidence lasting exactly as long as it took to see his name on an envelope. He stopped mid-stride for just a beat, then covered it with a too loud, "Hey now," as he pulled out a chair. But I saw it the half-second where his eyes went from the envelope to my face, and something behind them recalculated. My mother came in, pale, her purse clutched against her stomach like a shield, and didn't say hello. My father sat without taking off his jacket, like he intended to leave in 5 minutes. His jaw already set in the flat, closed expression I'd known my whole life. Kayla came in last and sat down next to me instead of next to our parents. It was a small thing. I noticed it because 3 days earlier, she'd sent me a text that just said, "I saw the police report notice come up on the family account. Are you okay?" I hadn't answered. I didn't trust it yet. But watching her choose that seat, I understood I hadn't imagined the shift. I thought for one strange second of every family photo we'd ever taken, how she'd always stood exactly between our parents, dead center, like she was holding them together. This was the first time in my memory she'd chosen a different spot. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" my father asked. His voice was quiet, but the whole table went still around it, the way a restaurant does right before a plate drops. I slid his envelope across. My hand didn't shake. I'd practiced that too. "Giving you a chance to tell the truth before someone else forces it out of you." Inside the account summary, the loan application's a page, bearing his signature as a witness. A signature I'd never once seen him give in front of me. My mother's envelope held verification calls made from her own number. Zion's held the business line paperwork, alongside a text he'd sent months back. Did the bank ever call? Kayla's held transfer records into her and Nolan's joint account. No one spoke for a long moment. Somewhere behind us, a waitress laughed at something, the sound strange and out of place against our silence. My father's fork sat untouched beside his plate. My mother's hands had gone still on top of her envelope, like she was afraid of what would happen if she actually opened it. "I thought Mom and Dad had permission," Zion said, pushing the papers back, not quite meeting my eyes. I asked why then he'd only liked a photo of me being humiliated instead of calling to ask. He didn't have an answer for that. He just looked down at the table, and for the first time since I'd known him, my brother looked smaller than the room around him. My mother tried to change the subject. It was temporary. It would all be paid back. I laid down the rejection letter from the accounting job, sliding it across the table, slow enough that everyone could watch it happen. 32,000 more a year. Gone, because of debt I never created. "This," I said, "is the cost of temporary." When my father's voice dropped into that same low register he used to end every argument in that house, I set down a spreadsheet, $61,240, itemized 4 years dated. My mother cried and accused me of turning love into numbers. Then Kayla's phone lit up face up on the table. A text from my mother. "Don't bring up Grandma's fund. Just stay quiet." For a second, nobody moved. The restaurant noise seemed to drop away entirely, like someone had turned a dial down on the whole room, leaving just the small blue glow of that screen and 6 words nobody was supposed to see. Kayla flipped it face down. Too late. The whole table had seen it. Kayla's stillness in that moment didn't come from disloyalty to me. It came from years of choosing peace over truth. She didn't freeze to protect our mother. She froze because admitting what she knew meant admitting she'd let it happen. Her real fear wasn't losing the family. It was losing the only role she'd ever been given inside it. The good daughter who never asked questions. That single dropped phone was the sound of a lifetime of silence finally cracking. I looked at my mother. My pulse was so loud in my own ears, I almost didn't hear myself speak. "You're the one who turned my identity into numbers first." Nobody moved. No one yelled. But something at that table had already changed hands quietly over plates of fried catfish nobody was eating anymore. I hadn't opened the last envelope yet. What was inside it would make everything they'd just seen feel like the smallest part of this story. For a moment, nobody at that table moved. The overhead light above us flickered once, the kind of thing you only notice when your whole body is already braced for something. And the kitchen bell dinged twice, like the restaurant itself wanted to break the silence for us. My hands were steady on the table, but underneath it, my knee wouldn't stop bouncing. I had rehearsed the words 20 times in my head. I had not rehearsed the sound of Aunt Faith standing up. Aunt Faith rose from the counter and set a summary of my grandmother's trust fund down in front of my father. The paper made almost no sound against the table, but my father flinched like it had been slammed. My grandmother, Odessa Griffin, never trusted banks the way she trusted people, which was to say, carefully, and only after watching them for years. She used to tell me, rocking on that same porch swing that creaked through half my childhood, that money left to a person too early just teaches them to spend it, and money left too late doesn't do anyone any good at all. 21 was the age she decided I could carry my own weight. She never explained why she'd picked that number for me and not for Kayla or Zion. I used to think it was favoritism. Sitting at that table, watching my father's hand tighten around his water glass, I understood for the first time that she might have simply seen something the rest of us hadn't yet. My grandmother had left me nearly $131,000, meant to release in full on my 21st birthday. 4 months before that birthday, my parents had withdrawn $94,000, citing tuition for a university I never attended, rent for an apartment I never lived in, and a computer purchase that matched dollar for dollar an invoice in Zion's business records. The rest, the part meant to come to me, never did. Zion didn't look up from the table when I said his name. Kayla did sharp fast, like she'd been slapped. Instead, my father had signed a document declaring me financially incapable and petitioning to keep control of the account, attaching a letter supposedly written by a licensed therapist. I'd never met that person. Ariel had confirmed with the therapist's office directly she'd never treated me and never wrote that letter. Ariel told me later that she'd called, expecting a runaround, and instead got put straight through to the therapist herself, a woman near retirement who sounded genuinely rattled once she understood what was being asked. She kept records for every patient she'd seen in 30 years of practice, and my name wasn't in a single one. She offered unprompted to put that in writing and sign it herself. This wasn't moving money around. This was forged paperwork built to hold on to money that was mine. There was one more detail. When Ariel sent me the original file of that letter, I checked the document properties. The creation date sat right there, one day after the first time I ever told my mother in our kitchen that I wanted my own place. 18 months before I actually left. The file had been made on the desktop computer in our living room. I read that date 3 times before it landed. Then my stomach dropped the way it does when a car goes over a hill too fast. 18 months. They hadn't reacted to me leaving. They'd been ready for it before I even knew I was capable of it. They hadn't just falsified paperwork after I decided to go. They'd started preparing to keep control of me the moment they heard I might leave. My father didn't see himself as a man stealing from his daughter. In his mind, he was defending a household he was terrified of losing control over. That signature wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was fear wearing the mask of authority. The same fear that made him need everyone in that house to keep needing him. The moment the timestamp proved he'd planned this before I'd even packed a single box, that fear turned into something he could no longer talk his way out of. Every memory shifted a little. Every gathering where my father introduced me as the one who still can't stand on her own, while I was quietly paying for Theo's tutoring and my mother's insurance. Those weren't just careless comments. They were building a story with a dollar value attached. One that let them keep my trust fund on paper, legally, with a signature and a fake letterhead behind it. I thought about the internship in Dallas I'd turned down at 22, my mother crying at this same kind of table. I thought about the way my father always found a soft, sad reason for me to stay every time I mentioned leaving. A leaking roof, a doctor's appointment, Theo needing a babysitter. At the time, it had felt like coincidence, like bad timing that kept following our family around. Sitting there with the timestamp in front of me, I understood it had never been coincidence. It had been maintenance. Kayla's hands were shaking. She admitted that after our restaurant meeting, our mother had texted her, "If Layla pushes this, we lose the house. Convince her she's wrong." Kayla had answered that she wouldn't lie for her. "I didn't lie for her," Kayla said again, like she needed all of us to hear it twice. "I just didn't say the truth loud enough for a long time. That's not the same thing. But it's not nothing either." My mother, in writing, admitted the trust money had been used where the family needed it most. Kayla forwarded the whole exchange to Ariel that afternoon and agreed to serve as a witness. Whatever alliance had held this family together collapsed at that table. Zion blamed our parents for telling him the credit line was clean. My father blamed Zion's failing business for needing it in the first place. My mother blamed me for not staying quiet the way I always had. No one blamed the choices that had actually caused all of it. They still thought this was a family disagreement. They had no idea what was coming next. I didn't go straight home that night. I sat in my car outside the restaurant for a long time, engine off, watching the neon "open" sign buzz and flicker through the windshield. Aunt Faith knocked on the glass eventually and got in the passenger seat without asking. We didn't talk about the trust fund or the timestamp or any of it. She just turned on the radio, low, some old gospel station she liked, and let me sit there until my hands stopped shaking too. "You did the right thing tonight," she said finally. "Doesn't mean it's going to feel good for a while." She was right. It didn't. The weeks after that dinner moved strangely. Half my life speeding forward through paperwork and phone calls, half of it holding painfully still. I went to work, I paid my own electric bill on time for the first time in months, and stood in my kitchen afterward, just looking at the confirmation email like it was a small trophy. At night, I still caught myself listening for a porch swing that wasn't there anymore, half expecting a text that said, "Everything was fine, we'd figured it out, come home." It never came. Instead, other things started arriving. Ariel filed the civil case the moment the 48-hour response window passed alongside the FTC and police reports we'd already opened. 3 days later, Zion's business partner pulled out. His landlord changed the locks over unpaid rent. His bank demanded a full accounting of the disputed line of credit. Zion called me twice during that stretch. I didn't answer either time. The first voicemail was angry, full of the same flat certainty our father used when he thought volume could stand in for proof. The second, 4 days later, was quieter. He didn't apologize. He just asked, in a voice I barely recognized, whether I'd known his business partner would find out this fast. I didn't call back. Some questions aren't really questions. They're just people looking for someone else to blame for the part they did themselves. My father was placed on unpaid leave after his employer, the same company whose paperwork required his witness signature every week, discovered the forgery tied to my case. My mother resigned from the church finance committee she'd chaired for 6 years, the one that had spent years deciding who deserved help paying their bills. Relatives who'd liked the Parasite post started quietly removing their reactions. Every drama family has that moment when the people who cheered the loudest go silent first. Mediation happened 6 weeks later, near Discovery Green downtown. The room had the particular hum of every office building I'd ever sat in, waiting for bad news recycled air, a water cooler gurgling in the corner, a framed print of a bluebonnet field nobody in the room was looking at. My father wore the same jacket he'd worn to the restaurant 6 weeks earlier, like it was armor he hadn't found time to take off. He didn't look at me when he sat down. My mother did once, then studied her hands for the rest of the morning. My parents came with their own attorney, seated apart from Zion, Proof the United Front had cracked completely. Kayla came as a cooperating witness, not a defendant. Their first offer asked me to absorb part of the fraudulent credit card debt in exchange for a private apology. Ariel rejected it before I opened my mouth. Their second offer proposed repayment over 15 years, but left the trust fund untouched with no public correction. I rejected that one myself. I said no quietly. It was the first time in that entire process my voice didn't shake while I did it. Then Nolan asked to speak privately with Ariel. He'd always been the kind of man who took up as little space as possible at family gatherings, refilling drinks, wrangling Theo away from the fireplace, agreeing with whatever kept the room calm. I used to think that was just his personality. Sitting in that mediation waiting room, I understood it might have been something closer to survival. Marrying into a family like mine meant learning early which questions were safe to ask out loud. He'd been quiet through all of this, the kind of man who goes still when he's scared of being pulled into something. He handed over an old message where Zion had once asked if he wanted to use Layla's clean credit to help secure funding. Nolan had said no. My father had told him not to worry, it was already arranged. He kept the message for over a year, too afraid to use it, until he decided he didn't want his son growing up in a family built on something nobody would name out loud. He told Ariel he kept picturing Theo 10 years from now, finding out the same way I had, a stranger sliding a printout across a desk and asking him to sit down. He said he'd rather Theo grow up watching someone choose honesty late than never watch anyone choose it at all. Then Ariel put something else on the screen. The log of that anonymous tip Aunt Faith had received 3 months before I moved out. The sending address traced to my father's recovery email, but the IP matched the house's Wi-Fi, time-stamped 9:14 in the morning on a day Kayla still had a key and was there alone with our mother. The projector fan was the loudest thing in the room while everyone read it twice. Everyone looked at Kayla. She didn't deny it. In a small voice, she said she hadn't known how to warn me without breaking everything apart, so she'd sent it from an account that wasn't hers and hoped someone else would find the courage she couldn't. Kayla hadn't sent that email to save me. She'd sent it because she couldn't live with what she knew and wasn't yet ready to say it out loud. She wanted someone else to find the courage she didn't have, so she could help without ever having to choose a side in front of our parents. That's the quiet tragedy underneath her silence. She loved me enough to warn me, but not yet enough to stand beside me. Not until she had no choice left. Nobody said anything for a moment. It wasn't outrage this time. It was something closer to recognition. The sound of one person's small, scared act of loyalty finally making sense. The final settlement required my parents to sell the family's cabin at Lake Conroe and liquidate part of their retirement savings to repay the trust and every documented damage. The fraudulent debts came off my credit permanently. Zion surrendered the remaining business assets. All 3 signed sworn statements confirming I'd never authorized a single account. And Kayla had to repost the original photo with a new caption Ariel had drafted, left up for 30 days, with my parents required to comment beneath it. Watching my father sign that final page, I noticed his hand didn't shake the way I might have expected. It was steady, almost businesslike. The same practiced motion he used on shipping paperwork every week of his working life. I don't know if that made it better or worse, that the man who'd forged a therapist's letter to control my inheritance could sign away his own lake house with the same flat calm he used to sign for a delivery. They signed. Every one of them. But the consequences weren't finished yet. 2 days later, Kayla posted the correction. The photo looked almost exactly the same as the one that started all of this. Same driveway, same rose bushes, same version of me walking away with a box in my arms. Only the words underneath it were different. Now I called my sister a parasite, while she was helping pay for this house, and while accounts she never knew about were funding this family and my brother's business. What I posted was wrong, and it was cruel. My mother commented that I'd never abandoned this family, and that she regretted using my information without permission. My father wrote one line: "The correction is accurate." Within 24 hours, the correction had more engagement than the original post ever did. A compliance officer at a local bank, someone who'd liked the first post without thinking twice, recognized the pattern and filed her own internal report. What started as a civil case began moving toward a criminal referral. Zion's investor sued him personally. He lost the business, the truck, the apartment, and moved back temporarily, he said, into the house on Lockwood Drive. The same house he'd once posted a photo celebrating my exit from. I heard that detail from Aunt Faith, not from him. I sat with it for a while. My brother, 33 years old, back in the room he grew up in, under the same roof he used to say he couldn't wait to grow past. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something quieter and less satisfying than that, like watching weather finally catch up to a forecast nobody wanted to believe. 3 months after that, the fraudulent debts vanished from my credit report for good. The accounting firm reinstated its original offer, same salary. The trust money moved into an account only I control. I used part of it to finish paying Ariel, invested most of the rest, and kept enough for a modest down payment on a place of my own in the East End. I didn't buy anything extravagant. Stability felt better than anything flashy could have. The place had a small covered porch out front, barely big enough for one chair. I bought a porch swing for it anyway, secondhand, slightly crooked from a guy clearing out his mother's garage. I oiled the hinges myself the first week, kneeling there with a little can of WD-40 and my hands smelling like metal for the rest of the day. It doesn't creak. I made sure of that before I ever sat in it. Kayla and I are rebuilding, slowly. She repaid her share, put off an expensive renovation, and she and Nolan started meeting with a financial counselor together. She's never once asked me to forget the silence she chose that morning on the driveway, only to let her earn something different now. We started small. Coffee twice a month at a place halfway between our two lives now. The first few times, neither of us mentioned the trial, or the trust fund, or the photo we talked about Theo's kindergarten teacher about whether the old vacuum had finally died for good. It felt strange talking about something as ordinary as a vacuum cleaner after everything else. But ordinary was the whole point. Last month, she brought Theo along for the first time since I moved out. He ran straight at my legs the way 4-year-olds do, no memory yet of any of it, and asked if I still had the porch swing from Grandma's house. I told him I had a new one. He asked if it creaked. I told him not anymore, and he seemed satisfied with that, the way kids are satisfied with small, clear answers to enormous questions. Aunt Faith is still who I call when doubt creeps back in. My parents send occasional letters through the address set for our no-contact period. Some still carry excuses. I read them when I'm ready, not before. I drove past the house on Lockwood Drive not long ago. Just once, not planned. The porch swing was still there. Somebody had finally oiled it. It didn't creak anymore. I don't know which of them did it or why. I thought about driving up, knocking, asking who'd finally done it. I didn't. Some questions don't need an answer to still mean something. I put the car in drive and went home to my own swing instead. The one that doesn't creak, because I made sure of it myself, the first week, with my own 2 hands. Every drama family has a version of that swing. A small thing nobody fixed for years, until suddenly someone finally did. This story reminds us that protecting yourself from the people you love isn't betrayal. It's just good bookkeeping for the heart. If you're the one who's always been counted on to keep the peace, here's something a neighbor learned the hard way. Keep a real paper folder with copies of anything that carries your name or your social security number, and check it twice a year the way you'd check your blood pressure. If a family member ever hands you papers to sign, just to help everybody out, take them home first. Read them at your own kitchen table, not theirs. Call your bank directly instead of asking someone else to explain what they told you. And if a conversation with family ever starts to feel like the ground is moving under your feet, invite a friend to sit with you next time, not to referee, just to witness. You don't need a dramatic exit or a courtroom to protect your peace. Sometimes it's as simple as a locked filing cabinet and a friend on the porch swing beside you. So you're never doing the math alone again.